Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. We have Jake, Zach, and Kyle on the podcast today. It's been a little bit since we've had a podcast. We've been busy over the summer, and the sports that we cover have slowed down a little bit, but we're looking forward to ramping back up with the NFL season. And we have a good show this for you guys today. So we're going to start with some conversation around Shohei Otani. I think I'm Shohei Otani. I think I'm
Shohei.
pronouncing that right.
Shohei.
Shohei.
You're close.
And then we're awesome. And then we're going to jump into some week one NFL predictions and some fantasy sleepers and picks as well. So we'll get into a good conversation about that. But to start with the podcast, we're going to jump right over to Kyle so he can give his thoughts on kind of what's going on with Shohei, his contract, his injury, and just some conversation around that.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, recently Shohei Otani is in the market for like a really big contract. And just recently he tore his UCL, which our injury expert here, Jake Bender, will tell you is basically Tommy John. And means that it's really going to affect his pitching a lot. So people before that injury were ballparking like 500 mil, 600 mil, 10-year contract, which would obviously be the largest contract in MLB history. The biggest right now, actually, I just looked this up, is Mike Trout for 426 million for 11 years. And some other notable news there were like, we're all Phillies fans. So Bryce Harper, 330 mil for 12 years. Which honestly, I think that's a decent contract. I'm not gonna lie, but uh, I honestly do think that he still has the biggest contract in history, but it is really tough, like statistically, for pitchers to come back from a Tommy John surgery. But even so, you're still getting a hitter who's batting over 300, leading the league in home runs at the moment. You're gonna still get a lot from that, like a generational talent. I think his pitching might take a step back, though.
Would you still pay him pitching and hitting numbers?
I probably would. I think I'd wait. That's probably what a lot of teams are going to do. They're going to wait for the offseason to see how that goes because he's going to require surgery over the offseason. Some people might just take a chance on it because they're like, oh, generational talent. He's going to come back. It's whatever. But I personally think his contract probably dropped 50 to 60 mil potentially, but I think it's still going to be around that 500 mil mark, if I had to guess.
Yeah, potentially, yes. I personally would pay him. Um, Even if he comes back from the UCL surgery or the Tommy John surgery, I think um, he could still be an average pitcher. That doesn't mean he needs to pitch within rotation every week. Even if they need him to pitch from the bullpen or whatever the case is, I think there's still room for him. There's still value, especially in playoffs. And even then, he's doing basically a replica season of what Aaron Judge did last year in regards to home runs. So I think I'd pay him at this point.
Yeah, I mean the home runs as a hitter, I think it's easy to make the case because even he's played now with this injury, right? And I've seen reports that like he even like declined an MRI like a month ago before like the injury got worse and stuff like that. Apparently it's come out in the past like 24 hours, but he's obviously still a great hitter. So in the MLB, there's a huge price tag on that. I do agree. I think the contract will reach 500 million. Just looking at like the all-time largest contracts in MLB history. The one question that I could kind of bring up as not being as big of an MLB fan as you guys are, has a pitcher ever gone through a surgery like that and then switched positions? And then if they've ever switched out of being a pitcher, is there, like what's the next highest paid position? Is it first base? Is it catcher?
I
Like
would
is there something that else
probably
that Shohei could transition into away from pitchers that even heard of before?
it's almost not even heard of to do the whole pitching and hitting thing to begin with. So I don't think we've really seen somebody just full switch from starting pitching to a position spot. If anything, they usually go from starting pitching to coming out of the bullpen to only pitch like an inning,
Yeah.
max
Yeah.
2 innings, just because that's how it works with the bullpen. Um, but if he's DHing, I'm not sure how the league rules work. If he's allowed to be a bullpen pitcher in a DH. Um,
Yeah, I don't know if that's never really been a thing before. So
no,
they might have to create some new rules for that. But back to your
yeah.
question, Zach, the only person that's actually ever done that and been like a consistent pitcher hitter was actually Babe Ruth. And he was probably only a pitcher through, I want to say like 3 or 4 seasons in MLB, and then he switched to right field. But with Shohei, I imagine they would just make him DH, which would
Yeah.
bring up the question about the bullpen.
That's why I said
Yeah.
as of late, I don't think there's a way he switches just because like back in the day, it was very heard of that people played multiple positions, pitch and hit. So you don't really see that anymore. So I feel like they'll just kind of be okay with paying him to hit home runs and hit the ball. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah. The other, so before we transition away from this conversation, the other big question that I have is you guys saw the Messi contract that they signed with the MLS. Did you see, he got like Apple's share of stuff like streaming rights, and he's like a partial owner in Inter Miami now. He has a franchise waiting for him when he's done. Being out here in Utah, actually, one of the richest families in Utah just talked about bringing an MLB team and having an expansion franchise come here. Do you think Shohei? I keep mispronouncing that. Do you think there's ever a time in MLB where you could see international players or any players start to take ownership in some of the franchises as well and have some of those similar contracts? I feels like to me, the next league that could do it besides the MLS would be the MLB, because of the long-term contracts, because of some of the interesting things that the MLB does with their collective bargaining agreements versus other professional leagues. It feels like that's the next league that could do it. Feels like Shohei would be a pretty good option to do it with. So do you guys think there's ever a precedent for that? Do you think that could ever happen?
I'll let Kyle go.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a possibility. I don't think, honestly, when you were talking about that, I was thinking more NBA. I feel like a lot more NBA players kind of transition and go on to become like part owners and stuff. But honestly, I could definitely see the MLB doing that. I just don't know when that would occur, to be honest.
Yeah, I will say, I think since we're bringing up all different leagues, I think MLB and the NBA both have opportunities to kind of propose that kind of situation. Um, but I think the MLB has a lot more international players, but I want to believe that the NBA has a lot of international superstars.
Mm.
So I think you need big names, big superstars to get those contracts and kind of be comparable to Messi. I feel like it's
Yeah.
gonna take a while for the MLB. Like even with Otani, I feel like he's the first one. I think you need somebody to top him, and then we can start talking. Um,
Yeah.
just because you need to build the popularity first, you just don't get it. So
Right. Right. Yeah. Interesting points. All right. Well, with that, we'll try to transition here into week one of the NFL season, unless you guys have anything else to share about Shohei.
no, I'm okay. Just get your money, big dog. Get your money.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So let's transition into week one NFL predictions then. We're going to try to do this relatively quickly. We're not going to give a whole explanation of who we think is going to win, but a 5 to 10 second little explanation is fine. So the first game that we're going to talk about is Chiefs Lions. I have the Chiefs taking over the Lions. Lions are pretty promising this year, but Chiefs are going to come out hot. Kyle?
Chiefs, they're good. Next question.
Chiefs, Super Bowl. Enough
All
said.
right. All right. I think we're in agreement on that one. Next one is Falcons Panthers. I have the Falcons beating the Panthers in week one. Love the Falcons running game. I think the Panthers are going to be a little bit inexperienced, a lot of newness there. I'll take the Falcons.
I am also taking the Falcons. Even though little spoiler ahead for the fantasy, I do not think Bijan Robinson is going to have as big of a role in this offense that people believe.
I'm taking the Falcons. I'm going the opposite route. I think Robinson's going to go off week one and show why he's a top fantasy pick there, Kyle.
Okay.
Well, that is going to be an interesting conversation when we get into fantasy. So that should be good. The next one is Ravens Texans. I'm going to take the Ravens. Pretty simple there.
Ravens, Lamar is the greatest quarterback of all time. Next question.
Wow. Okay. I'm taking the Ravens. I'm taking the Ravens, and it's just because this is the healthiest they'll ever be in the whole season.
All right. Okay. That's uncalled for.
I mean, he does make a good point. And for those of you that aren't watching on YouTube and are just listening on the podcast, every time Kyle has given his answer so far, Bender's face has not been pleased. We'll just say that. All right, next game is Bengals and Browns. I'm going to take the Bengals. I think the Browns have a lot of newness as well. I still don't trust Deshaun Watson. Bengals brought in Irv Smith Jr. I like him better than Hayden Hurst in that offense. Anyway, take the Bengals beating up on the Browns in week one.
I'm actually going to go against you here. I'm going to go Browns. I think Joe Burrow isn't going to be fully healthy yet. I actually really think that Deshaun is going to have a bounce back year. They have a great running game, Nick Chubb. They have a great receiver, Amari Cooper. Njoku has been a nice tight end, and I believe their defense is pretty healthy now. So I'm going to take the Browns.
I'm gonna take the Bengals just because they have more continuity to start a season. I do have belief in Deshaun Watson this year, though, so let's keep an eye on that.
Very interesting. All right, on to the next one, Jaguars and Colts. I'm going to take the Jaguars here, starting a rookie QB. I think Anthony Richardson does have a lot of promise. I think he's going to be really talented. It's going to be fun to watch him play, but Jaguars are going to win this game in week 1.
Yeah, I think you have to take the Jaguars. I don't see any chance that, especially with the Jonathan Taylor thing. I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on there.
I'm taking the Jags, and Calvin Ridley's going to go off week 1.
We can agree on that. I like Calvin Ridley a lot coming back this season. I think he's another guy that's finally really healthy and ready to get back to it. A little bit forgotten about too. Next one is Vikings and Buccaneers. I'm going to take the Vikings here. A little more continuity as well. Baker Mayfield, the Bucs QB1. I like their defense more than the Vikings, but I think the Vikings have too many weapons. So I'll take them over the Bucs week 1.
I'm also going to go Vikings, but honestly, I have faith in Baker. I'm not going to lie. He was one of the best deep ball throwers last year, and I think over his career, actually. So people sleep on him a lot, but I'm still taking the Vikings, obviously.
I think it's a trap game, so I'm going to take the Bucs.
Ooh.
I just think the Vikings are going to look a little different without Dalvin Cook this year.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad pick. And I do kind of echo some of those sentiments about Baker Mayfield. He's not a bad quarterback. I don't think he was ever in the right system in Cleveland. So we'll see how that shakes out. All right, next one
He
is
looked good in
Saints.
preseason, by the way. Sorry.
He did. Yeah. No, he looked great in preseason. He was one of the best QBs in preseason.
Right.
All right, next is Saints and Titans. I'm going to have the Saints over the Titans here. I like Derek Carr with the Saints now. I like some of the weapons they have. And I think the Titans are sort of at the end of their AFC dominance. They've been, a 10, 11 win team the past couple of years. I don't see that in them this year anymore. So
I think this is actually probably going to be one of the closest games of the week, just because you have. I honestly think the Titans offense is going to take a step forward with. They got a bunch of good new guys. They got Hopkins coming in, who's kind of going to step into that AJ Brown role that they had. Chig, I forget his Chig Okonkwo. Yeah, he's really good tight end. Yeah, something like that. He's a good tight end. They have good young guys. Their defense is questionable, but I'm actually going to go Saints, I think.
I'm going to go Saints, but I can vouch for everything Kyle's saying about the Titans.
Yeah, tight game. All right, next one is Steelers and 49ers. Pretty obvious for me. I'm going to pick the Steelers.
Yeah, 49ers. I think it's pretty obvious 49ers.
I'm going to take the Steelers.
What?
I feel like, yeah, so I think the Steelers defense looks pretty damn good in preseason, and I think they'll be able to get to Brock Purdy, and that's when Brock Purdy struggled the most in the playoffs. So
it's also the first Steelers home game to start a season in like 4 years, I think. So there's going to be a lot of hype at Acrisure Stadium. I hate saying that. It's Heinz Field. Next game, Commanders and Cardinals. I'm going to take the Commanders over the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are just in shambles. I think Jonathan Gannon was not the best hire for them either. So I'm definitely going to take the Commanders over the Cardinals.
I agree. I think the Commanders, even though they're in a really tough conference, which is going to be, or division, which is going to be difficult. I really like Sam Howell. I like Jahan Dotson. They have a nice 1-2 punch at running back. Their defense is really good because they have Chase Young coming back too. So I really like the Commanders this year.
I'm going to take the Commanders as well.
Yeah, the Commanders, you mentioned the division they're in. They're also 8-1 last year in that really tough division. And I think that says something about the development we might be able to see from them. The fact that they were able to be pretty much 500 in that division. Bears and Packers, I'm going to take the Bears here. Jordan Love looked really good in preseason, but I like what the Bears bring to the table. I think DJ Moore does more for that offense and does more for Justin Fields than people realize. So I'm going to take the Bears. I think they have a breakout year, might even win 9-10 games.
I'm a big Justin Fields hater. I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to go against the Bears here.
I am going to take the Bears, and I think Justin Fields takes a step up with DJ Moore.
All right, on to the next one, Broncos and Raiders. I'm going to take the Broncos. I think the new head coach in Denver will make a huge difference for Russ. And I still hate Josh McDaniel for the Raiders.
Broncos are a team that I'm high on again. I think they're gonna really pull it together this year. They got, even though Jerry Jeudy just got hurt, they got good receivers. Well, actually, really one good receiver anymore, Sutton. But I still like them. I like their defense. I think Russ is going to pull it together.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are gonna pull that one out easy.
Awesome. All right, next one, and we're on the last 5 games here. Looks like Dolphins and Chargers. I'm going to take the Dolphins. They seem really explosive this year. I think that will be a high-scoring game. Should be fun to watch.
I'm actually going to go Chargers. I really like Herbert this year. I think he's going to be good with all his weapons back.
I'm gonna say Chargers. Miami's overhyped unless they get Jonathan Taylor.
All right.
Oh, interesting. Their
Fair.
running back room is a little bit of an issue. They have some speed, but not a whole lot of.
They got some old speed. That's
Yeah, and running backs that are more track stars than running backs. So that
They
could
got to put some jets on those wheelchairs there. They're walking
Yeah,
around.
could become an issue. Yeah. All right, Eagles and Patriots. I'm going to take the Eagles here. Yeah, I think that they continue their run. They brought back a lot of pieces. Jalen Carter's there. I've been hearing so many reports out of training camp about him. I think Eagles would be good again.
Yeah, as much as it hurts me to say, sorry, Eagles gonna take the win there.
Yeah. Eagles, sadly.
Yeah, none of us like saying that, but respect is due, so we'll give it. All right, Seahawks and Rams. I'm going to take the Seahawks here. I love Jackson Smith and Jigba. Love Devin Witherspoon. I love what the Seahawks did in the draft. I think they're going to be even better this year than they were last year.
Yeah, Rams are just kind of trash outside of Stafford and Cup. So I think you just got to go Seahawks.
I'm actually going to go Rams.
What?
I think Cooper Kupp coming back. Cooper Kupp coming back and having a whole season without playoffs and getting banged up. I think health is going to do them well for week 1.
Wow.
That is an interesting take. Even if they're healthy, I don't know if the Rams have enough to compete, but we'll see. All right, Cowboys and Giants. I have a big smile on my face. I want to say the Giants, but I do think the Cowboys are going to win this game. I'm not going to piss Bender off just for the sake of pissing Bender off. I think the Cowboys win this game in week 1.
I mean, I'll do it. I'm going to go Giants. I think Danny Dimes is going to take the step up. I've heard really good things about Darren Waller and Danny Dimes from training camp. I believe in Drabble coach, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Dable.
Sorry.
Yeah, Dable.
Yeah. I believe in him. Go Giants.
I'm going to take the Cowboys. I think it'll be a close game, but I would not be surprised if the Giants won.
Spoken like a truly depressed Cowboys fan.
Yeah. I mean, as most NFC East games go, we just got time talking about the Commanders somehow finishing 8-8 in that division. So, and beat the Eagles last year. Yeah. All right. Jets and Bills is the last game. That's the Monday night game in week 1. I'm going to take the Jets. I watched the Bills starters play against the Steelers starters in week 2 of the preseason, and they did not look ready at all. It is a preseason game, but execution, preparation, the way you take your mindset into a game all means something. I think the Bills just don't have that it factor. They have so much talent, but I just don't think they have what it takes. I'll take the Jets.
I'm gonna take the Bills. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not buying the Jets hype. I don't think A-Rod's gonna pull them together. I think they're gonna struggle again, but they're definitely gonna be better than last year. But I'm gonna take the Bills here.
I'm gonna take the Bills, more continuity. I think the Jets are gonna take a little bit of the first part of the season trying to figure it out. I think the Jets are also a little bit overhyped, not as much as the Dolphins. But I think the Jets will end up being a wild card team, and the Bills will win that division.
All right. Well, that is all the week 1 predictions. So any last comments you guys want to make about any of those predictions or anything else you want to get in about any of those teams before we move on to fantasy stuff?
Ravens 2023 Super Bowl champions.
Anything real that would like to be said before we move on to before fantasy stuff?
I do have a question for Kyle. I'd like to know why you're not as much of a believer in Justin Fields.
I just don't like him. I don't like his face.
That's crazy.
No, seriously though, I don't think he's a very good. This is gonna sound weird coming from a Ravens fan. I just don't think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's a good, he's obviously well at maneuvering the pocket. We see what he can do with his designed runs and stuff. I just don't think he has the arm for it. And I know that's what they say about Lamar, but I've seen Lamar put up 450 yards through the air. When he's on and healthy. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it makes a difference. Yeah. I mean, I think it makes a difference too with the weapons that they have there. I mean, Justin Fields,
Yeah.
since he's been in Chicago, has had to run for his life, and his best receiver has been Chase Claypool, which again, coming from a Steelers fan, not a good place to be in. Um,
Fair.
so I think the upgraded weapons will help him a lot. I think the opinion that someone can have on Justin Fields can be much more solidified after this year because there shouldn't be any excuses now.
I
So
agree with
if you
that.
feel the same way after this year, then you probably have a really good point.
Yeah, I'm willing to give him a chance this year, but I still don't like his face.
All
Yikes.
right. All right. On to fantasy stuff then. The way that we're going to kind of do this is we're going to have like fantasy must, either a sleeper or a value pick we think, or someone who's just going to have a breakout year, whatever it is. We'll kind of explain each one, and then someone that we'd stay away from. So someone that we wouldn't draft in a fantasy league. We're going to do quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. So we're going to kind of go through those one by one. We're going to start with QBs. Bender, do you want to start with your fantasy must and must not for QBs?
Yeah, so my must draft is Justin Herbert. I think he has a lot of weapons around him.
Mm.
Austin Eckler got re-signed. My stay away from is Dak Prescott, surprisingly enough.
Dang.
Um,
Yikes.
Obviously my answer with the Giants possibly could win, but I picked the Cowboys was not too convincing, and that is why, because we're waiting on Dak.
All right.
Kyle, would you like to tell yours?
Yeah, I actually had two written down, and one was Justin Herbert, so I'll agree with you there. And then my other one is a deep, like last round pick. If you're going late QB, I'm looking at Sam Howell. I think he's been really good. He has the rushing upside. If you watch anything in preseason, like he's throwing dimes out there, and he's got Terry McLaurin, who is a little banged up at the moment, but he'll be back. And then Jahan Dotson, who's been great, and I think he's going to take that second year leap. So I have Sam Howell.
That's awesome. Any QB that you'd stay away from?
Oh, sorry about yeah, I forgot. Joe Burrow. Do not like Joe
Oh,
Burrow, especially coming off the injury. That was kind of part of my pick earlier.
Ravens
It's a
fan.
calf injury, so it shouldn't be too detrimental, but I just think where he's going in like the fourth or fifth round, you can get much better QBs at a
mm,
better value for that. I wouldn't waste that kind of pick that early.
mm. It is interesting. He does have some issues to start the season as well. I watched him throw 4 picks and have like 6 turnovers against the Steelers in week one
Right.
of last year. So I think there is a little bit of just hangover from the Bengals, and they always seem to turn it on at the end of the season. So at least for the early part of fantasy, you could be right. You could be right. My QB must is actually going to be Geno Smith. Geno Smith is like a later QB. He's like ranked as like a 15th QB right now. And like I said, I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State. I think he adds a really solid third wide receiver. They brought in Noah Fant. I really like Kenneth Walker at running back. I think that offense is a lot better than people give it credit for. And Geno Smith doesn't get talked about. He was a comeback player of the year last year. He looked really good. So I think you
Yeah.
only gave him more weapons. You only helped him more. And I don't think he's I think he's like a real value play. Like you said, if you're looking for a QB outside of the first couple of rounds, Geno Smith I really like. And then a QB that I wouldn't go to is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is a top 10 QB in most drafts, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his weapons are overrated. They're primarily running team, so they're going to give the ball to Nick Chubb a lot.
Yeah,
If you
yep.
look at the receivers, it's Amari Cooper and Joku, and then after that, like Donovan Peoples-Jones is your next best wide receiver.
Hey, he's been
So
good.
I mean he's
Don't
been
hate on my
decent,
man.
but I mean if you're looking
Yeah.
at a top
Don't
10 ranked QB in fantasy, I don't see it. I don't
No,
see it
I
with that
agree.
offense.
don't hate on
Got
my Michigan players.
yeah. I mean, hey, like again, nothing against him. If he was a
He's a
third
good
row,
third. He's a
yeah,
good
a
third.
third, exactly. I think they need one more piece. If there was another like really good like second tier or even just a really solid third that you could pair there again, like I think it'd be different. But there's not enough pieces, and they're just going to run the air out of the ball. So I don't think Deshaun Watson it should be a top 10 QB in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, yeah. All right, let's move on to running backs. Kyle, do you want to kick us off again?
Yeah, I'll go James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. And I know that whole offense is going to be a dumpster fire, but the one thing that is not going to be is James Conner because he's guaranteed touches, he's involved in the passing game. So if you're in PPR, half PPR, you're going to get those points. Last year, after he came back from injury, he was averaging almost 20 fantasy points over the last couple games, and he was the RB1 over that. So I think he's really good for where he's going in the fifth or sixth round. Like that's a huge value that you can get. I think a lot of people are overlooking him. just because of how bad the Cardinals are going to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
His backup just got hurt too, and they were already planning on using him
Yeah, there's
without
like,
a committee.
yeah, there's no running back room behind him. So I'm running with him.
Who's your stay away from?
I keep forgetting that. Sorry. This one, I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. Bijan Robinson. I don't want any part of him. I don't want to touch him. People are drafting him way too early, first round. I told one of my friends who was talking about drafting him like second overall. I said I wouldn't even draft him in the fourth round. I'm going to be honest. I can't get behind it. They have Cordell Patterson. The offense is awful. They still have Tyler Algier.
Algier.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Um, that's a crowded. It's going to be a running back by committee, and I understand Bijan. Like you use that early of a draft pick, you're going to want to use him, but also it's going to be development. They're going to like ease him in. It's a bad offense. I'm not a fan of where he's going. I'm not wasting a first round pick on it.
Bad
You
offense,
can
but it was one of the top rushing offenses.
true, true, but also like if I can have Eckler or Bijan Robinson, I'm taking Eckler, and people are taking Bijan over him. Why would I risk that? You know?
I'll take Robinson in the second round. I wouldn't take him in the first, but
Yeah. Okay. I can agree. Second or third.
okay.
Speaking of that, Bender.
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
now
Ben.
that I'm done having an aneurysm. Um, so person you should draft at the running back spot is Javonte Williams, coming off of injury with Denver. In the preseason, he showed his catching ability, pass catching ability. So I think if you're in a PPR league, I think that's very beneficial, whether it's committee or not. In Denver, he was the number one before he got hurt, and he was showing improvement. So I would draft him. I'm not a big fan of committees, so the guy I would say to stay away from in regards to running backs is DeAndre Swift of the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
They just have too many guys in that running back room that they like to use, and at random times, there's no saying that DeAndre Swift is even like the goal line back. Like we just don't know how the Eagles are going to use their guys every year, and even then, Jalen Hurts runs the ball, so he's easily going to take touchdowns away from those guys.
Yep.
Building off of that, Kenneth Gainwell has sounded like
Yes.
he's almost the RB1 there. So
Mhm.
Swift is going like sixth round for some reason, sixth or seventh round. Makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think that's a big name thing, but I think you're right. There's a running back by committee there. Hertz takes away some of those carries, and it's kind of the same argument I have for my running back that I wouldn't touch on a different team. But the running back that I would say is a really good draft is Brian Robinson Jr. For the Commanders. I think they're going to lean on the run game a good bit there still. He's the number one running back on the roster right now. Antonio Gibson has fallen off a lot. In the last 11 games of 2022, in 8 of the last 11 games, he had at least 15 carries. So he is the feature back there. They went 6-4 in that time. So they had more success than they had in the beginning of the season. And he's like the 30th or 35th running back on most charts right now. Which means you're getting him in a little bit of a later round. He's not one of the top tier guys. So I think he'll be a feature back in Washington. I think he's going to pop off a couple of 100-yard games this year. Could be really good value for going Brian Robinson Jr. And then, like I mentioned, a running back by committee and a quarterback that runs the ball a lot. I do not like J.K. Dobbins for this year. I think he's had an injury history. I like the other running backs on that roster more anyway. Again, coming from a Steelers fan, when Justice Hill and Gus Edwards play, they run the ball better anyway than when J.K. Dobbins is in the lineup. So I think the running back by committee there, it's going to take away a lot of his touches. And he's just ranked too high. And they also brought in Melvin Gordon, and I know it's an old name, but there's a lot of people in that running back room. So I would not touch J.K. Dobbins.
I agree.
I think Brian Robinson's a good pick if you're in a 12-man league because that's where depth matters the most.
Mm-hmm.
All right, wide receivers. Bender, gonna go back to you.
Yeah, sure. I have two guys you should draft, just because they're on new teams. Kyle, you'll love this one. DJ Moore with the Bears is one of them, and the other one is Calvin Ridley. I just feel like both of those guys are gonna break out this year. They're getting drafted around like the fifth round or so, depending on who you are, what kind of league you're in. And I think they're going to be third round value at least. Um, Explosive offense with the Jaguars, a lot of weapons there, but I think Ridley makes a difference. And DJ Moore's the number one in Chicago. So I think that is what it is. The guy to stay away from is Mike Williams for the Chargers. He always has injury history. Everybody wants to talk about Keenan Allen and old man Keenan Allen, but last year he was the healthiest receiver. And I just think he's the best option if you want to go for any Chargers receiver. Mike Williams is playing only like half the season, half the fantasy season, I should say. So I would stay away from him. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
I actually agree with the DJ Moore. I drafted him yesterday. I did a draft with some of my friends. But listen, okay, I believe in DJ Moore's talent. I think he'll get some good touches. Like the other day in the preseason game, he got the screen, took it for 63 yards. So like,
enough for fantasy. You just don't like Justin Fields
yeah,
at
I don't
all.
like his face. I told you
Yeah,
That's
actually his face.
crazy.
Yeah.
that. I'll go next.
His, uh,
Wide receivers. This kind of builds on my Sam Howell thing. I love Jahan Dotson this year. You can get him 7th or 8th round. He's going to take that second year jump, I believe. And then my other one is Cortland Sutton of the Broncos, just because I think they're going to figure that offense out. You can get him later than Dotson, like 9th or 10th round. And Jerry Jeudy just went down with another injury, which he has done every single year of his career, feels like. So he's going to be the number one there. They have to throw to somebody. And then a wide receiver that I don't like is Jalen Waddle. I'm kind of building off that overrated Dolphins because he's going in the second round. And for what you can get around him, like you can get so much running back depth, so many better receivers. I'm not wasting a second round pick on a number 2 receiver.
There's other receivers around that area that's getting drafted, like Devontae's dropping, AJ Brown's dropping into that area.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in that spot.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of Devontae, I can get into that in a second, but the wide receiver that I would draft is actually Calvin Austin from the Steelers. He's going to be a 4th wide receiver, but he's going to be a super late round pick. You can pick him up as a depth piece. They're going to use him on a lot of jet motion, so you're going to get rushing yards and potential big plays. They're going to use him in screen game and trick plays. He's going to be the token piece. He's going to play the Tavon Austin role, the sort of trickster in the offense. So I think there's a lot of potential for touchdowns on multiple weeks, and even in the kick return game, he was really close to breaking a couple. So if he ever provides you more points, I think he's a guy that's just going to get in the end zone a lot this year based on the way the Steelers will use him. And he's obviously not a high draft pick, but way down on the draft board. If you need a late round pick, I think Calvin Austin is a really good selection there. And I also think because Allen Robinson's on the roster, they're going to find every opportunity to put Calvin Austin in the slot because he's the second year guy as opposed to Allen Robinson, who's pushing 30. And then as far as the wide receiver that I wouldn't draft, I would actually not draft Davante Adams. And most of that is because of what else is happening with the Raiders. I think the Raiders have Josh Jacobs and then like really nothing else to take pressure off of Davante Adams. You got Jimmy G as the quarterback. And again, I still don't like Josh McDaniels. Your next best receivers are Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow. That doesn't scare me at all. And he's all right, but I don't like Davante Adams. I think he's going to get too much attention on him. I think he's too high of a draft pick for the value that he's going to bring. This is a bit of a hot take. This might be one of the first years Davante Adams doesn't eclipse 1,000 receiving yards in a while.
Wow. I can't believe. See, I agree with all your points there, and then I think, oh, it's Davante Adams. I have bet against Davante Adams in the past. I'm never gonna do it again. I can't agree with that.
I will never not draft Davante Adams. Like I swear to you, it doesn't matter what quarterback he has, he's always open.
Exactly.
So I don't agree with any of that. I don't care who he's playing with. The only thing that's going to stop him from 1,000 yards is him tearing an ACL.
Don't think the organization's in good shape. Don't like the coach. Don't like the rest of the offense. I think it's really hard to function in a setting like that. It's okay for the first year because it's all still new and you find a way to make it work. Year 2 is when some of those things start to really come out and you start to get really disgruntled players. I think there's going to be more happening with the Raiders than meets the eye.
Then let's talk about this. Season. If he's unhealthy or unhappy and wants to go somewhere else, you know where he's going? The New York Jets. So he's going to get his yards. It's fine.
We'll see if that could be pulled off in the middle of the season because that is also an interesting prediction. If Davante Adams gets unhappy getting traded to the Jets. All right, let's move on then to the tight ends as we kind of wrap up here. Kyle, let's go back to you to start with tight ends.
All right, so I'm actually looking at two here. One kind of early, one kind of late. My early pick is Darren Waller, like I talked about earlier. I've been hearing great things out of training camp, so I trust him. Late is Juwan Johnson for the Saints. Derek Carr is there. He really likes his tight end, and he was great last year. He had a couple multiple touchdown games. Then do not draft. I have George Kittle. His production last year was based off of a couple big plays. There's so many weapons in that offense. I just don't trust him with such an early pick.
That's fair.
Yeah.
My guy to draft is TJ Hawkinson. He showed out ever since he got traded to the Vikings last year. No more Dalvin Cook, more pass game. So he'll get more work that way. And I think it's only fair that if Zach pisses me off with the Devontae Adams comment, the guy to stay away from this year is Pat Fryermuth because he is not a top five tight end. Go on.
Yeah, we can talk about Fryermuth, but think he might have a double digit tight end season or a double digit touchdown season. But the tight end that I would draft is actually Juwan Johnson too. I had the same name. I think
Yeah.
he's not getting enough credit. He probably should be a little bit higher on most draft boards. And yeah, he had a really solid season. He was a wide receiver first as well. So if you're talking
Yeah.
fantasy, he played wide receiver at Penn State, was really successful there. Moved him to tight end. I think because of that, he gets a lot more favorable matchups than you might realize. I like Juwan Johnson a lot in that offense with Derek Carr coming, like you said too. And then the tight end that I wouldn't draft is Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is coming off an injury. I think it's not a good offense for him. They also have Jonnu Smith on the roster now, so that's going to take away some tight end touches. And then we just talked about their running back by committee. They're one of the top rushing offenses in the entire league. I think there's a ton of yards to be had for Bijan and Cordarrelle and Algier. I don't think that Kyle Pitts is going to be able to regain that 1,000-yard season he had his rookie year. I think he's going to struggle again this year. And he's not a good fit for that offense. And speaking of the guys you could get ahead of Kyle Pitts, yeah, you can get Njoku. Or I'm sorry, after Kyle Pitts, you can get Njoku after Kyle Pitts, Goddard, Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid. If there's another name I could throw out that I really like, it's Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to overtake Dawson Knox on the Bills. But those would be my tight end picks.
I will say Evan Ingram on the Jags is very sneaky.
Yep. You can
I
get
like
him
Dallas
after,
Goedert
yeah. Yeah.
as a honorable
Those
mention.
yeah, I mean those two guys you can get after Kyle Pitts. And to me, that's better value and a better offense with less competition in the tight end room.
For sure. Any last thoughts? Anything you want to make me mad about before we hop off of this?
I think the only reason if Fryermuth is a bad fantasy pick this year, the only reason is because Connor Hayward and Darnell Washington are going to have breakout seasons as the other sort of tight ends in the Steelers roster.
I also like Najee as well. Just 'cause he'll get the workload.
Yeah.
But yeah,
All right.
thanks for tuning in this time, guys. Next time we'll talk about more baseball, just because playoffs are creeping up on us, and NFL season should be started by then. And we'll see how horribly wrong or right some of our sleeper picks are.
All right.